The first day of December is a special day in the history of independent Kazakhstan. The older generation remembers exactly how 30 years ago they chose the leader who led the country to great heights. The Soviet Union collapsed and its member countries no longer existed, and there was shortage of goods, unemployment, and lack of money. Thousands of businesses closed after the collapse. The situation was tough.
Денег не было, казна была пуста.
There was no money. The treasury was empty. There were demonstrations everywhere. Miners were underground and railroad workers lie on the tracks. Salaries were not paid. Factories stopped operating and no one buys our products. All economic ties were severed.
Все хозяйственные связи были нарушены.
Kazakhstan needed to have an open free market instead of a strictly planned administrative economy. But there was no template to follow, writes the first president. The republic had to find its own way. Prominent leaders such as Margaret Thatcher, Francois Mitterrand, Helmut Kohl, George W. Bush, Lee Kuan Yew and many other world-class politicians helped establish the young state. At the time of the USSR collapse, Nursultan Nazarbayev was already the country's leader. The institution of the presidency was created in April 1990, and the head of the republic was elected by the deputies of the Supreme Soviet. A year and a half later, Nursultan Nazarbayev held an election as he wanted to gain the support of the people. He spoke about it many times during meetings with Kazakhstanis.
Хош келдіңіз Қостанай жеріне.
Уважаемые земляки, большое спасибо вам за чувства, которые вы выражаете сегодня, встречая меня. Вам известно, что...
Dear fellow countrymen, thank you very much for the feelings that you express when meeting me. As you have known, the multinational population of our republic will have to elect a president of Kazakhstan on December 1st for the first time in its history. This is a historical moment that is needed in the society. It's not driven by desires nor the elections happening in other republics. Sovereign Kazakhstan is building the economic and political relations with other countries. Therefore, it's necessary for us to have an elected leader. The sign of a country's democracy is the election of its president by the people. And if we were to build a democratic Kazakhstan, we need to decide who will lead the republic through this difficult time.
Самым серьезным признаком проявления демократизма является избрание всем народом своего президента. Поэтому надо казахстанцам определиться, с кем он пойдет через это трудное время.
On December 1st, 1991, almost 9 million people, or 89% of the total voters, cast their votes. 99% of them supported the candidacy of their chosen leader. Nursultan Nazarbayev gained the popular vote as an elected president.
Собственно говоря, этот период времени, 90-91 год, это сильнейший крах и та трещина, которая пролегла между жизнью прошлой и той, которая будет.
The period between 1990 and 1991 has seen the biggest collapse and the crack that lay between the past and the future. Back then, it was hard to say what would happen. That is why you need to understand that the Kazakh SSR, represented by its leader, was one of the forces that believed that it was necessary for the republic to create a new economic management and have new administrative. That is why our first president didn't by accident happen to be a doctor of economics and author of the strategy of resource conservation and transition to a market economy. This is an extremely important moment to understand the results and consequences of the first few years after independence. This nationalistic thinking, which is in the character of Nursultan Nazarbayev, was likely the only salvation in comparison with other failed projects that were implemented in other former Soviet republics.
Самых первых лет после обретения независимости. Вот этот вот рациональный тип мышления, который характерен для Нурсултана Назарбаева, он, наверное, был единственным спасением по сравнению с теми провальными проектами, которые пытались реализовать в бывших советских республиках.
One of the first decisions of the head of state was to rename the Kazakh SSR to the Republic of Kazakhstan based on the decree signed on December 10. 6 days later, the Supreme Council proclaimed state independence. From this moment, a new countdown begins. All eyes are on the first president and how he would develop the country. Biographers say that to understand his personality, one needs to plunge into history.
Ömrüm, tuğan jerim, rahim nuru, tuğan jerim,
Ushkanir is one of the pearls of the Trans-Ili Alatau, a picturesque tract near the modern village of Shamalgan, where the ancestral land of Nazarbayev was once located. This was also the birthplace of the future president. Nursultan Abishevich comes from the Shopirashti clan. In his autobiography book, the first president writes that today it has become fashionable to look for blue blood in our ancestors. But it is not in me, he says. I am the son, grandson, and the great-grandson of shepherds. According to the curator of the museum funds, the first president's grandfather was well respected. People always seek help and support from him. He was elected a public judge due to his wisdom and discretion. His seal is still kept in one of the museums, along with images of another ancestor of the first president, the Karasai Batir. He was known for his exploits in a war against the Jungars. Children were often told about his stories, and they dreamed of who they would become in the future. The young first president saw his future differently. During his childhood, Nursultan Abishevich dreamed of becoming a pilot. Here's an image of a little boy in a large steppe, and somewhere in the distance, there's an airplane, like a big bright dream. Unfortunately, his dream didn't materialize. The first president's childhood dream almost came true following his admission to the Institute of Civil Aviation in Kiev. But more on that later. Unknown details of Nursultan Nazarbayev's biography are revealed in the Historical and Cultural Center of the first president. It is located in the Karaganda region, the city of metallurgists. The fiery stage of the first president's career started in Temirtau. Thousands of exhibits were collected over the 10 years of the museum's existence. Government agencies and those who were personally acquainted with the future leader helped with the collection. Photographs from a family album were given, as well as textbooks that were read by the first president. There were even original documents that were sent from Ukraine of one of the best graduates of the Dnipro-Dzerzhinsk school that includes an autobiography, characteristics report, and report cards. Judging by the documents, Nursultan Nazarbayev also excelled at the school.
Эти шахматы были переданы нашему центру соратникам Нурсултана Назарбаева.
Look at this chess set. It was given by our center by Nursultan Nazarbayev's colleague, Yermek Tolubayev. They bought it for 3 rubles and 60 kopecks. They lived together in the same dorm room number 208. They even wrote the number of their room at the back of the chessboard so that it wouldn't be lost.
Шахмат 208, комната 208.
After finishing school, Nursultan's first attempt to enter university failed, but the second attempt turned out to be successful. The 18-year-old's dream of studying at an aviation institute was discussed at a family meeting. The eldest's decision was not in his favor. Reluctantly, he took the documents from the admissions committee. His fate was made based on a newspaper advertisement. A factory is recruiting students to be trained to work at its metallurgical plant that will start operations in Temirtau.
В то время как такового металлургического комбината еще не было, он только строился, поэтому они были зачислены в строительные бригады, где работали в том числе бетонщиками.
At the time, the metallurgical plant was being built, so the students were put into construction teams. They had to do various works, including as concrete workers. In July 1960, when the first metal was found in Kazakhstan's Magnitogorsk area, the students, including Nursultan Nazarbayev himself, started to extract the metals out. Each student has his own specialty. Initially, Nazarbayev worked as a cast iron operator. Then he was transferred to be in charge of the furnaces at the blast furnace.
Затем уже был переведен в горновые на доменную печь.
1960 год, даже 59-й, да, мы приехали на казахстанскую магнитку по комсомольской путевке.
In 1959-1960, we arrived at Kazakhstan's Magnitogorsk with a Komsomol card of admission. I graduated from school after the 10th grade, while Nursultan graduated 1 year earlier. We were both in Dneprodzerzhinsk in Ukraine in 1960. I was sent to the metallurgical plant in Magnitogorsk. Our training was 1 year, but actually, it was 1 year and 4 months. We met in the dorm, at the shop, we greeted each other. We were still young back then, unmarried. We worked in the same department for many years. We had to take shifts.
Привет, привет, там же все же молодые, да, все не женатые. Вот и пошло в одном цеху, столько лет проработали, да. Смену друг у друга принимали там.
The future Minister of Foreign Affairs, Tolutai Suleimanov, also began his journey at Kazakhstan's Magnitogorsk. He remembers how the steel was tempered. The work was exhausting that many fell ill in the first few months. Some people couldn't stand the physical labor and left, while others gritted their teeth and continued to work. The work became a good training ground for them.
Условия работы тогда были очень тяжелыми. Горновые в основном работали с помощью совковой лопаты, лома, отбойного молотка.
The working conditions were very poor. The miners worked mainly with a shovel, crowbar, and a jackhammer at very high temperatures. Many people had nosebleeds. It was hard to work in the summer, and the workers often poured cold water on themselves. Nazarbayev recalled in his book Without Right and Left that his father visited him at the plant, and he was shocked to see the working conditions of his son.
И пришел к нему на завод, он просто был в ужасе, когда увидел, в каких условиях работает его сын.
Just 2 years after the training, the young metallurgical plant worker Nursultan Nazarbayev was noticed by a factory photographer who was tasked to make textured photographs. The photographer realized that tens of thousands of young workers at the union plant site would follow Nazarbayev's lead. People said that he has a heart as metal. Nursultan's famous works can be viewed in many museums in Kazakhstan.
Поскольку работа горнового очень непростая, то она сразу же выявляет в людях все их качества, такие необходимые для...
Given that the work of a metallurgist is very difficult, it immediately reveals the quality of the people. And quality is important to become a leader, which was evident in the young metallurgist Nursultan Nazarbayev during his youth. His character and leadership developed while working at the metallurgical site. When he returned to the site in the early 1970s as union organizer of the plant, he already made serious contributions to the formation of the Mirtau city, as well as to the development of the metallurgical plant.
Он уже очень серьезный вклад внес и в становление города Темиртау, и в развитие металлургического комбината в том числе.
As Nursultan Nazarbayev's associates recall, he didn't need to lead a union back then. But in the 1970s, there were many problems at the plant that he couldn't ignore. The issues could only be solved through the union. At the end of December 1976, a devastating article titled "Rank Among the Laggards" was published in the country's main newspaper, Pravda. The article on the Karmet Kombinat incident was written by the secretary of the union committee, Nursultan Nazarbayev. He wrote about the debts, the shortage of metal, and empty promises from the company's management.
Не хватало жилья, не хватало спортивных сооружений, спортзалов, допустим, там, так, стадиона не было, допустим, там. Вот. Доступ не особенно был организован, потому что город был молодой,
There wasn't enough housing, sports facilities, gyms, and there was no stadium. Leisure activities were non-existent because the Mirtau city was quite young at that time. The meals weren't properly planned too. There were very few groceries and we had to queue to get food products. That was in early 1960s. Nazarbayev was asked to raise the issues to the central authorities, especially Moscow, because even though the plant is in Kazakhstan, but it was still under the Union. The plant was under the responsibility of the USSR Ministry of Ferrous Metallurgy, who was in charge of supervision, supply and finance.
Хотя и в Казахстане, но оно было союзного подчинения. Министерство черной металлургии СССР. Оно курировало, оно, так сказать, снабжало, финансировало.
The author of the article made sure that the report on the activities at the plant was heard at the highest level. It bore fruit. Delegations arrived at the city of metallurgists, and most importantly, they began to allocate funds to improve the livelihoods of the workers. Several hostels, a palace of culture, a new sports complex, and a stadium were built. The world was changing rapidly in the early 1990s. It was important for Kazakhstan to adapt to the changes economically as well as structurally. The successful transformations during the early years of independence, the titanic work to attract investments, and the strengthening of authority in the international arena have made a huge impact. The beginning of the year 2000 was marked by the growth of the economy and the income of the population. The financial system of Kazakhstan was recognized as one of the most progressive. A national fund was created to protect the republic from external risks. The unemployed and self-employed were involved in various types of economic activities through training and grants. New projects are announced every year to improve the quality of life of Kazakhstanis.
Вот эта его решительность, вот эта вот закалка, которую вот на металлургии и печах он получил.
This is his determination, his character, that was built while he was at the metallurgical plant. Not everyone can handle metal. Not all boys are brave enough to jump over the furnace or turn it over. Labor is not something that can be done by everyone.
Трудом. Не каждый может это делать, и не каждому это дано.
The first president has always paid great attention to the strengthening of peace and social harmony within the country after having built a new capital, which has become the largest business and innovation center of the Eurasian region, and having created a modern and progressive state. The negative forecasts made by skeptics at the dawn of independence were proved wrong.
Достаточно авторитетные зарубежные эксперты, они нам предрекали достаточно серьезное конфликтное общество.
A few of quite reputable foreign experts predicted a rather serious conflicted society, but thanks to our policy that rallied and united the people, the Kazakhstan model of social harmony and national unity was created.
Это казахстанская модель общественного согласия и общенационального единства.
The name of the first president of Kazakhstan today is on par with the great international reformers and politicians. The capital, airport, mountain peak and streets are named after the first president in Kazakhstan and abroad as a sign of respect to the Kazakh leader. Two largest educational institutions were named after him, the Nazarbayev University and the Nazarbayev Intellectual Schools, where students won international competitions more than once. 10th grader Sultanat Alisheva is one of the top prize winners. She studies languages, promotes national products and develops a mobile application that can help a person to become productive.
Не все люди могут быть продуктивны в одно время. Кому-то легче.
Not everyone can be productive at the same time. Some people can do homework at night, while some finds it easier to do it in the morning. We want to create a schedule app that can be tailored to each individual.
Для каждого человека.
Another student, Aldiyar Pazilov, dreams of making the planet cleaner. He's developing a photobioreactor with other students.
Как работает данная система? Здесь у нас находятся водоросли, которые как раз-таки являются главным.
How does this system work? Algae has such a specific feature. They eat carbon dioxide, and after brainstorming with my team members, we decided to create an installation that purifies the air.
Подумав с ребятами немного, решили создать вот такую вот интересную установку, которая могла бы и очищать воздух.
It was the creativity of the youth that the first president had believed in when he instructed to open universities that teach new specialties as well as schools. Over the years of independence, more than 1,800 schools have been built that take the helm and continue the path of the first president.